Welcome, everyone, to another BRAP rant. I wasn't anticipating doing a BRAP rant this evening, but you know what? I said, what the heck? I had the time to do it. Just got back from some baseball and, wanted to discuss the Bloomberg Sarah Bond interview because she did actually respond to a question by the interviewer at Bloomberg. And who was asked directly about, and I'm sorry, the interview was Dina Bass from Bloomberg. And Sarah was asked about the closures. And so we'll get into that a little bit. Also, we'll discuss Mike Ybarra's comments on everything that happened recently. But, again, first of all, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining me this impromptu BRAP rant. I mean, it literally just tweeted this out about 15 minutes ago. So again, thank you everyone for showing up and supporting the channel. Please do me a favor. I'm going to drop a link here in the live chat. If you could be so kind, let everyone know that we're live. Share the link on Facebook, on your favorite social media platform, Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days. Tweet a family member out. Tell them to come over and check out BRAP. What's up, Ryan Landis? Yes, AAA BRAP. Thank you, Ryan. Actually, Ryan, I've actually not been playing AAA games recently. I've been playing Ybarra Chronicles, which is currently available on Game Pass. It's not just only available on Game Pass. It's on PlayStation and the Nintendo Switch, but I got it on PC Game Pass because I did subscribe to Game Pass for the remainder of this year, PC Game Pass, and, why not, right? There's some good games, I think, coming out for the Xbox. We have Ybarra Chronicles just came out, Persona 3 Reload, which I've been playing as well. Oh, I haven't played recently, but I was playing it. And we have Hellblade 2 coming out. I believe it's next week. Ryan. So Ybarra Chronicles is a spiritual successor to the Suikoden games. Have you ever played Suikoden 1 and 2 or 3? 3 was the my least favorite of the Suikoden series, so it's a spiritual successor to the Suikoden games. It's a 2D JRPG. So if you like those kinds of games, then I would recommend checking out. But I've enjoyed it so far. And I've kind of put Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on the shelf. Although I shouldn't say I put it on the shelf. I'll probably get to it tonight. But anyhow. Oh, that's cool, Ryan. Ryan, are you a fan of Capono 5150 to support what you like, buy a game today? You know what, Capono? Oh, man, you're absolutely right. And I probably should have bought Ybarra Chronicles because look, I don't disagree with what Sean Layden said on What's Up PlayStation. I believe it was back in maybe February or early March. Excuse me, when he was on that show. And that was a great listen to, by the way. Sean's always a great guest on What's Up PlayStation. Shout out to Persona and Bari for having him on multiple times now on the show, and he's always insightful. Sean's always it's always a great conversation with Sean. Provides a lot of insight to things that are happening in the industry. But one of the things Sean said when he was signing off that show was, buy your game, support your devs. That's the way to do it. And, look, I understand not everyone has the ability to buy every game, but if you can, buy your games. That is the best way to support developers when they launch games, bar none. And again, I'm not shaming anyone who doesn't have the means to do so. I understand that. If you don't, you don't. But if you do, support your devs. Buy the games. It's the best way to support them. And if you're someone out there saying, hey, AAA games are not sustainable, and you think indies or double A's are the solution to the challenges in the gaming industry, then support those indie studios, support those double A's. Because if you don't support them, they're not going to thrive either. That's what all three led to the closure of THQ back in the days. I saw somebody tweet out the other day saying that, don't you think THQ would have rather been acquired than gone out of business completely? And I'm like, yeah, probably. Yeah. But acquisition doesn't guarantee job security either. Man, acquisitions have a failure rate of about 80 to 90%, depending on what statistic you see on the internet. It could be anywhere from 70, 80, 89. I've seen both. So let's just say 85% or 80%. Michael Meridian says, I'm doing my part. Yeah. You sound like, Michael, you sound like Starship Troopers. Ryan says, I agree, support the devs. That said, I'm guilty of buying during great sales. I hear you. Still supporting the devs, though. All right, so I'm trying this Prime energy drink, Ice Pop. Do you guys drink Prime? Anyone have kids? Apparently, like, Prime is big with kids these days. I don't know why. By the way, a real quick show of hands. Who is a professional wrestling fan? I'm going to get into a little professional wrestling rant here. And it's, Ghostfix says, I was watching Starship Troopers today. That's a great movie. Rico's Roughnecks. Michael Ironside. Oh, big fan. No, RPG says anti-Logan Paul. Really? Why is that? Yeah, Capono says, my kids absolutely love wrestling. Capono, I do too. So look, this is not a professional wrestling podcast, although I have been toying with the idea of maybe doing a professional wrestling podcast my spare time when I'm not doing BRAP. Do it, Rico. That's right. when I'm not doing a video game podcast. Look, I got to say something about AEW. When AEW first came into existence, I was excited. This is great. The WWE product at the time was not really that good, in my opinion. It is much better now under Triple H's creative vision, if you will, now that Vince McMahon's gone. Thank goodness, because I think Triple H's done a much better job at storytelling and booking some of these matches. And what's really interesting is that, at least in my memories, WWE's always kind of shied away from mentioning like other factions or other people or other organizations that wrestlers had come from. Unless it was WCW, because they had purchased WCW at the time. You would see like Diamond Dallas Page. He'd make his debut on WWE. Oh, it's Diamond Dallas Page from WCW. Something like that. But they've done a really good job recently of incorporating, and I think really just by doing so, excuse me, by doing so really speaking to some of the diehard professional wrestling fans that are out there that follow multiple promotions. I know before Backlash at the press conference, Cody Rhodes had mentioned a Bullet Club reference to AJ Styles. Both were former Bullet Club members in New Japan Wrestling, and Cody's like, hey, we were both leaders of Bullet Club. And I don't think Vince would have allowed that kind of reference, but you see that now, which I think is kind of cool. So, but with AEW, look, the matches are good, but sometimes they book matches and it's like, why are you booking this? There's a match today between Dax Hardwood and someone else. I don't remember. I think it's the Dynamite Kid's son. And it's like, okay, so what's the purpose of this match? Like, why should I watch this match? And I think the issue they're having is, and I see in certain instances they're focusing on storytelling, like the angle with Tony Khan taking a pile driver from the Young Bucks, and he's out, and he's doing kayfabe on the NFL draft, or not breaking kayfabe. That's a good storyline, but I think they need to be consistent with the other members of the roster, like having Dax Harwood fight the Dynamite Kid's son. Like, why? Like, why should I want to watch something like that? What's the story behind that? The story is what gets people to want to watch these matches, to get people and fans invested in these matches or these angles. So I think that's just a quick criticism of AEW, and I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them go away, because frankly, we need competition. We talk about competition here on the show quite frequently. It's funny. I just saw a bunch of people leave the show because of professional wrestling, but competition is important. So anyhow, that's just my quick rant of AEW. All right, let me. I'm sorry, I'm reading this Tom Warner tweet here. This whole it's no longer Xbox but Microsoft gaming stuff is question mark. It's been like that for 2 years and was announced at the same time as the ABK acquisition. Microsoft didn't spend $68 billion. That's it. So there's been a lot of conversation around whether it's now Microsoft gaming. I've seen that conversation, and I mean it officially hasn't been changed. I'm reading this Tom Warren tweet here. All right, I'm going to read this again. So Tom's saying this whole it's no longer Xbox but Microsoft gaming stuff is questionable. It's been like this for 2 years and was announced at the same time as the ABK acquisition. Microsoft didn't spend $68 billion on ABK just for Xbox, and I've made that clear before. So I've seen a lot of that. And this goes to something that I've been thinking about here more recently about the future of Xbox. And look, I don't think Microsoft's not getting out of gaming. They didn't spend the amount of money they did to exit video games. They're going to be around. I think in the future, we know Sarah Bond talked about this July that Microsoft is going to have their mobile store where games like Candy Crush, Minecraft will be available. You know, I think that they are looking to be... Look, I don't think they're going to get out of hardware anytime soon. I don't see that happening. Although I do see similarities to some of the behaviors and things that they did with like Windows Phone, Zune. You know, when they eventually transition out of that. I depending, I think, on how the next Xbox does, I think that could maybe, in my opinion, determine the future of Xbox hardware if that console sells less than what's happening now. I mean, as we know, based on Microsoft's own data on their recent Q3, I mean, they're seeing negative 30% revenue declines in hardware, which means they're not selling. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, you know, the PlayStation 5 is not selling in the UK. That is true. Actually, all three platforms in the UK are down, per Christopher Dring of GameIndustry.biz, which, by the way, if you're not reading GameIndustry.biz to get your gaming news, absolutely check them out. Great website. That's where I get a lot of my gaming news. They have very good articles. Chris String, I don't know if you're listening, Chris, but I did tweet you the other day. Love to have you on the show. Would love to discuss the current state of the gaming industry with you. I think Chris is very insightful and clearly has a lot of great conversations with with people that actually work in the industry. So, Chris, if you're listening, please come on the show. We'd love to have you on, discuss the gaming industry with you. It would be an honor and a privilege. But I tell you what, this Prime Ice Pop's not too bad. Yeah, not too bad. Now, I'm drinking the energy drink, not the hydration drink. There's actually two types of drinks. I just learned that today. All right, so where was I? Mr. Sarkis says, what about internal politics between ABK and Xbox executives? I don't think ABK cares about Xbox as a brand platform. I don't know. Who knows? It's a great question. You know, I think ABK is like, look, let us do ours. In my opinion, I would imagine ABK is like, hey, you know what? Let us do our thing. Give us the resources to keep cranking out these titles that we, the Candy Crushes and the Call of Duty on a yearly basis. But yeah, I don't necessarily know that Microsoft's going to totally can Xbox. I think Xbox. Craig Impromptu says, BRAP drinking an energy drink just to be in bed before 9. Oh man, I'm not that old. I need to be like Slow-Mo and have a refrigerator in my office right next to my gaming rig, within arm's reach. All right, let me retweet the link here. BRAP is live. Autobots. All right, later I'm letting everyone know we're live again. All right. Yeah, I just, I've been thinking about this. Like, I don't know. I mean, and let me know what you guys think of the live chat. Like, I'm not so sure that Microsoft would just can the Xbox brand. I mean, it's been around for 22 years now? 23 years? Do we really think that they're going to just call it Microsoft Gaming. I just don't think Microsoft Gaming would resonate with gamers. I could be wrong. The Element Hero says we're injecting caffeine into your veins. Oh my goodness. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, does Microsoft Gaming sound cool, appealing? I don't think so. Like, Xbox always, to me, the Xbox just had this really cool Gen X kind of feel to it. The Xbox. Well, BV, I understand your point. I mean, Xbox isn't working well either. But it's still a brand. It's still a thing. Good or bad. I just, and I was wondering, like, because I have seen this talk around Microsoft Gaming, and perhaps that's something that is used quite a bit, Microsoft Gaming, and under that you have Xbox, but I don't see a scenario where, and I could be wrong, just in my opinion, I don't think Microsoft Gaming has a cool factor to it. Microsoft Gaming, no, it's like, remember when they did like Microsoft Live, like for PC instead of Xbox Live? And then they changed it to Xbox Live. Blady says Xbox is only known in the U.S. I mean, yeah, it's the U.S. is the biggest market. Gregor Von Doom says, imagine trying to market Microsoft anything to kids. It sounds so corporate and boring. Yeah, I guess like I agree. I kind of agree with that, Gregor. Like it just doesn't have this like cool, sexy factor to it, Like, imagine if Sony, like, called the PlayStation Sony Gaming. Like, that doesn't sound cool. Like, PlayStation. Like, the Xbox just has this cool ring to it. It's like despite however, despite where the Xbox currently sits in the market, I think it's a cool name. I've always loved the color scheme of the Xbox, black and green. And I always thought it was cool. And I love the evolution of the X. Gaming Forte brings up an interesting point. Forte, how are you today, sir? What's up, Rich Kreiser? Forte says, does the name matter if they're third party? It's a good point, Forte. I mean, Microsoft Gaming Publishing? I could see that point. So, Forte, do you think that, because I really think at some point, and I could be wrong, as much as I like to think that I get it right most of the time, I could be wrong here. I think that Xbox is eventually, I think they're going to go third party eventually. Oh, I should say eventually. They are already, in my opinion, they are a third-party publisher who happens to make hardware. And a lot of people are going to push back on that. And the reason I say that is because, look, they're bringing their first-party exclusives to Nintendo and PlayStation now. Christopher Dring, when he reported on some of the conversations he was having at GDC, where he heard that publishers were questioning even supporting the Xbox, he had said the majority of their exclusives are going to be coming to other platforms, rival platforms. That is behavior of a third-party publisher. Yeah, Ryan Lance says they're already third-party. Every game is on Steam, BRAP. Well, every game's on Steam. Well, I mean, but Ryan, but let's take it a step further. Not every game, but they're bringing games to PlayStation now. They're bringing games to PlayStation. So I'll go back to Forte's point. Like Forte says, does the name matter if they're third-party? Maybe not. Maybe Forte's onto something here. Maybe the name doesn't matter. I mean, what do you guys think of the live chat? Do you think if they're like, okay, you know what, we're not doing hardware anymore, we're just going to do third party. Oh, come on, Forte. Let me just, Mike Forte. Like they say, we're going to drop the Xbox hardware. Do they just drop the Xbox name and just say, hey, you know what, we're just going to be Xbox, we're just going to be Microsoft Publishing now. And that's the future I think is going to, I think they eventually drop hardware unless the hardware picks up for them, whatever they're going to do with this, this, what's rumored to be kind of this hybrid handheld type system. I think if that doesn't take off, that doesn't do well, and they end up doing worse than they are now. I think that Microsoft may put the kibosh on the Xbox hardware. Then I could see them saying, all right, since we're not making hardware, why do we need the Xbox name? We're just going to be Microsoft Game Publishing or Microsoft Gaming. And as a publisher, Microsoft is they're going to be, I'd say they're going to be, they are a powerhouse publisher now, given the acquisition of ABK. There's some, I know a lot of people say, oh, BRAP, you hate Xbox. And it's like, no, I don't hate Xbox. I'm critical of them because I want them to do well. I think having good competition is healthy for the market, healthy for all of us. The competition drives innovation, drives creativity, drives quality. I don't want PlayStation being by themselves or Nintendo. Well, Nintendo is kind of by themselves in their own space. But, I want to see these companies push each other because it benefits us as consumers. Hey, what's up, Game Logic?
What's up, BRAP?
What's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just sitting here drinking some coffee.
Coffee? Well, you know what? I shouldn't say. I'm drinking Ice Pop Prime. So that's my energy drink. I suppose coffee's probably healthier for me than, who knows? God knows what's in this stuff. I'm reading words that I can't read. Carbonated filter water, coconut. I know what coconut water is. Citric acid. Anyhow. All right. So, but thank you for joining the Rant, Game Logic. I know you've been busy today podcasting, so I appreciate the time. So yeah, I mean, I could see that, like, if that happened, Forte, then maybe they drop it. Forte then says the name Xbox is dog water. I think it's a great name, but they killed that name over the many years. These moves are only the latest ways to kill off a brand. Okay. Let me grab the super chat here, and I'll go to you here just a second, Logic. Doomsayers Network with a $2 super chat says, "What's up, BRAP? Great show Wednesday night." Thank you so much for that super chat. All right, so Logic, what say you, sir? Like, what do you think about? Because there has been some chatter on there. I was just reading what Tom Warren said about Microsoft Gaming. I think you've heard Forte's comments. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think they drop the Xbox name? Things become Microsoft Gaming?
I mean, no, I don't think they'll drop hardware. I think before they go to that move, I think they will do what I've said, and they'll do something that's very Microsoft Surface-like, and it'll be boutique, and it'll just be for the small handful of people left. I would say this as long as Spencer remains at the helm. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you swap him out and you bring somebody new in, that new person's going to come in. They're going to say all bets are off. Wasn't me who agreed or committed to anything. So talk to the last guy.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's a chance that they'll do something boutique. And I've talked about, making a high end play for the uber faithful, and then making a super low end play that's just a streaming stick for those people who are on the Series S, so they don't feel abandoned if they need to do and quote in air quotes upgrade. I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility when you talk about, do they drop the Xbox name? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to do something that is Microsoft publishing but still use the label of Xbox Studios.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a micro play, you could have a small number of studios, maybe these original studios that were not Bethesda and Activision, that could still be referred to as, an Xbox studio. One of the things to remember in the realm of tech and trademark is that legacy names carry branding power. And so the name Polaroid has stuck around. The name of Nokia has stuck around. The name of BlackBerry has stuck around. And they don't necessarily mean the same things that they meant
Hardee's.
Before. What's that?
I said Hardee's. I'm joking, but yeah.
So, I mean, those are all, possibilities, I think.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Again, like I was saying, I just feel like to your point about like legacy brands, like you mentioned, Polaroid. That's why I don't see them just moving on from Xbox. I mean, it's been around for 22 years now. People know it. You know, it's for me as a gamer and somebody who, for those who don't know, I was an Xbox Live beta tester. It'd be kind of weird to just drop the Xbox name. What was it, Logic? You remember where they had Microsoft? Was it Microsoft like Live or something like that on PC? Was
they
that
had,
what
well,
called?
worse than that. They had games. They had GIFWIL. They had games for Windows Live.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes. Oh, yeah. And then eventually they brought over. Yeah, there we go. Carrie says games for. But then it eventually became Xbox Live. Like they eventually like changed. And I always thought it was kind of weird. I'm like, well, why wouldn't they just call it Xbox Live? Like that was kind of odd. But yeah, I just think it would be weird to drop the Xbox brand. I think, despite whatever its place is in the market, I still think it has some value. There's some recognition there. You know, you see the X, you know what it stands for. It's gaming. So, all right, I do want to move on to what Mike Ybarra said here, because I thought Mike had some interesting insight into everything that's happening here. This tweet's kind of long, so I'm gonna read this here. Mike Ybarra, formerly of Xbox, says, "Happy Friday. People have asked me what I think about the Xbox strategy in all this press. Publications have asked me questions about Xbox. I 100% love Xbox. I think Xbox can find a path to great success for their teams and players around the world. 100%. 110%. To answer some questions, Xbox has always been accountable for its business. Even when it was small or in the red, pressure exists and always will." By the way, Logic, you know, I'm curious, you know, like Ryan McCaffrey had this interview, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the people he was interviewing were Xbox employees. Yeah, okay.
Employees.
Yeah, I wonder if he was talking like
Fairly,
Robbie, but yeah, go ahead.
I think he said fairly senior prior Xbox employees.
So I'm wondering if like that's Robbie Bach, Ed Freeze, because Peter Moore. Yeah, it's a great one.
Because remember Peter Moore just recently did an interview kind of commenting on the future of Xbox. So I mean that tells me that his line has been open to accept calls, right, for interviews like that. So
Peter's coming back. I'm going to throw out this conspiracy theory. Peter's not coming back. I'm joking, but all right. So he goes on to say, even when it was small or in the red, pressure exists and always will. I see some articles today with anonymous Xboxers talking about the board. I don't see this as the board doing something different. It's not the function of a board to be operators that dictate to business units, teams what to do day to day. Sure, pressure and stakes are always high and only get higher as you grow. I've never seen Satya dictate something top down. He questions and pushes, but empowers his teams. He's a fantastic leader. Logic, that when I was reading this the other day, that quote and what he says there made me think about the question you asked me on Tuesday, I believe it was. I think you had asked me who I thought was responsible for the what we just saw this week.
Who would you assign assign causality to? Amy, Satya, or Phil?
Yeah, and I said Amy Hood. I said Amy's looking at the numbers and she's like, "This isn't working. We've made this tremendous investment. We need to make some cuts. Figure it out." So, but I'm sure Satya was like, "Yeah, I agree with this." I'm sure Amy's like in his ear, and I'm sure he's like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, it makes sense." The idea of the market. This is interesting. We talked about the market, the console market not growing. We've talked about this quite a bit here on the show. The idea of the market isn't growing is a PR excuse. As a team, it's your job to drive your own growth, even if the overall market isn't growing at the anticipated rate. I think it's more the strategy isn't working as expected, which is okay. Strategies have to continually shift in a market that moves as fast as gaming does. I think that when I read that, when I initially read that last part there, Logic, it made me think about what you've talked about, how like people are like, oh, the market's or the industry's changing, and you're like, yeah, it always changes. And I even think I want to say you even said it changes rapidly, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't say it changes rapidly. I said that it's always evolving.
Okay.
I think what I've asserted is that it is very rare and few and far between, and you can put your finger on it on a map. Like there haven't been these schisms and these cataclysms leading to revolutionary change, and that's what people have been arguing. They're like, we're on the verge of some apocalypse, and I'm like, again, like many movies famously say, my friend, the apocalypse has been going on this entire time. Right? This isn't new. I mean, and we on the Doomsayers podcast, we brought up the 50-year history chart, and I'm like, I hate to attribute this quote to but a fairly well-known, well-respected thought leader in the industry and studier of the market said the consoles peaked in 2008. And again, the chart I'm looking at is not solely consoles, so it's not solely hardware. But I'm like, but the market has peaked many times in the past history, and it has fallen off, and then it has recovered, and that's what happens in a business cycle. This isn't. I mean, even if you look at, I was about to say the spinning disk drive, right? And the spinning disk drive as a market went through heaves and changes, and then we brought SSDs in, and you know what? There's a huge demand for spinning hard disks right now because that's still the cheapest level of large volume storage. And guess what people want large volume storage for now? The data that AI and machine learning needs. So, I mean, these things happen, and then markets pick back up. So I think, particularly as an entertainment industry, we're just not looking at, I would say the data that I've been looking at doesn't lead me to believe that we're on the cliff side of a 1983 style collapse, right, of the gaming industry, which I also brought up on Doomsayers contest, on Doomsayers podcast, even as bad as that was a collapse in the United States. The rest of the world went on evolving its gaming industry.
That's a great point, Logic. And that's been a lot of the conversation too, that we're at a tipping point where AAA games aren't sustainable. We're a lot of people think we're on a cliff with those types of games. I don't necessarily agree with that, because you and I and everyone else on this show, we've talked about, just look at the FPD numbers. Majority of the FPDs, the top charting games, top 10, are usually AAA games. And so,
well, and even this week, I mean, you tweeted it out, right? All this talk of like the industry's not growing and all of these problems, and I'm like, here comes Capcom saying, "Hold my beer."
Exactly. Capcom has had 7 consecutive years of record profits,
and that's another key element, right? Is a lot of people try to point to causality of what's going on, and it's all this discussion of revenue, and like I fail to understand why we can't get our heads and arms wrapped around the notion that it's not revenue, it's profit, it's COGS. It's on GCP. We were talking to Marchie this morning, and and he and I doubled down on that, right? It's revenue. It's not revenue. It's profits. It's margin. It's cost of goods sold. It's how many dollars of sales do I need to make in order to earn $1 of profit? And so it's a matter of efficiency, operational efficiencies, right, and making the ship go. When these choices are being made, and what predicts the future. Lots of people predicting, talking about, Game Pass makes lots of money, and I'm like, again, you can sell a lot of lemonade, but if it's costing you a crap ton of money to buy lemon.
Did we lose Logic? Did we lose you?
No. You still got me?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, you said something about crap ton of selling lemonade or something, and then you cut off.
I was saying you can sell a crap ton. You can sell a lot of lemonade, right? Be making revenue hand over fist, but if it's costing you a crap ton of money to buy lemons, then it may not mean a whole lot.
Exactly. That's a great point. And I also I've said this before too. And I know you said this as well. But like I don't see this cliff so long as there's still demand for AAA content. And we haven't seen that demand like dwindle just yet. Sony releases a AAA game, it charts. We see, I'm trying to think some other AAA games that come out that chart. But we do see that like Hogwarts Legacy last year was, and I think is Hogwarts still charting, by the way, on NPD?
I think it might be. I mean,
yeah.
And we just talked about the NPD numbers last month, right? We have all of this, AAA games are the problem, exclusives are the problem. And I'm like, please explain to me why 7 games in the top 20 on the NPD charts are AAA exclusive titles that are only selling on one platform.
Yeah, exactly. And that to me signals a market that wants those types of experiences. And so long as we, I think you guys said this on GCP today, something about like we as long as we keep asking for a specific type of game, maybe it was a reference to GTA 5, I don't remember now. The developers are going to continue making those kinds of experiences as long as we continue buying them. So that's what I'm saying. Like I just don't see that cliff based on NPD, the numbers coming out of Europe. When you see AAA games, we talk about the Game Awards. I mean, you typically the games that are in the conversation for Game of the Year, not always, but most of the times, are big AAA games. I mean, I think did Sony have like 3? I don't remember the Keeleys this year. I know Spider-Man was in there. I don't know if they had another game in there. But we see that recognition by the industry, not just with the Keeleys, but we see this with the GDC awards. We see this with DICE. We see this with BAFTA. We see these games that cost a lot of money. They are consistently being praised by the industry and also being consumed by the market based on what we see at NPD. Prices. Yeah, go ahead.
If AAA games and exclusives are the problem, then why did Microsoft spend $70 billion acquiring AAA games and I mean, they're not exclusives, but I mean, if AAA games are the problem, why did they spend $70 billion going after a studio, a stable of studios that does AAA games?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Bethesda. I mean, they didn't buy Bethesda for Dishonored. They bought Bethesda for The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, some of these big titles. I want to go to something Player just said here. Game Industry Biz says console hardware is down 25% for all platforms. I did see that Player.
In the UK, correct?
In the UK, yes. Yeah, exactly, in the UK. And actually, Christopher Dring had alluded that with PlayStation 5, their decline is you look at where they're coming from. They're coming off a very high period of sales, right? Where they were selling a lot of consoles. So just some additional context there, but even with Nintendo, there's no, I think Nintendo has kind of hit critical mass right now in the market, which is why you're seeing a decline in Nintendo Switch hardware. You see Matt Pixatello tweeting out, hey, we could really, the hardware market could really use a new Nintendo Switch that would boost hardware console sales, but that's not going to happen until next year. All right, I forgot where I was here, Lodge, because I'm reading the live chat. Mike Ybarra. We go back to Ybarra's comments here. All right, I'll say again, this all comes down to making great games, which I don't disagree with. If you make great games, consumer demand will follow, and your business can do well, even in low market growth years. A great game is a $500 million plus $1 billion profit generator for the business across platforms. Given the size of studios, you need to get to a world where a few of the teams are delivering against this at the right cadence. You don't need all your studios doing big, huge games, and shouldn't, as the risk profile is too large. After all, your install base is big right now, given where we are in this console generation, and of course, big on PC as well. So the opportunity exists for success. If you aren't making great games, then your hardware isn't selling and your subscription is flatlining. The clarity of strategy or execution is broken somewhere and needs to be fixed, inclusive of ensuring leadership and team capability to drive great game development and growth. They 100% have the teams who can make great games. It just isn't consistently happening. I don't disagree with them. I think there just hasn't been that consistency with them. And I also don't disagree, logic with Ybarra saying if you aren't making great games, then your hardware isn't selling, your subscription is flatlining. One of the, and I've said this numerous occasions on this show, one of the reasons why I jumped into Game Pass back in 2017 was this idea of, oh, well, if I get like Gears, Forza, Halo, in a year, like that's great. That's a great release cadence. That is great ROI for me. And we just haven't seen that from them. And was it 2017 a year when they did that? Did they have like Gears and like Forza or something within a month of each other in Game Pass? I don't remember now. Let's see here. Then Ybarra goes on to say, I see two paths here. If your North Star is the Game Pass subscription, you have to take that exclusive to your services and hardware and be all in across games, hardware and services and exclusives, and an exclusive go big plan. Pumping regular 90+ rated games into this will drive consumer affinity and satisfaction. That said, it is high risk, high reward, and takes a strong desire to win. Well, hey, what do you think about that, pumping regular 90+ rated games? I mean, that sounds very easy to do, right? On paper. But
well,
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're the guy who's running Blizzard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, those maybe weren't 90+ games, and they definitely, hacked some people off. But I think what you can say is that they had a number of big profile, unquestionably bangers, right, over there. World of Warcraft, Diablo 4, Overwatch, but the first time it hit, Call of Duty. They had things in their stable that even when they did misses, like the Warcraft 3 remake, remaster, whatever, like Call of Duty Vanguard, even when they did misses, they were, Diablo Immortal, which I think was commercially okay, but it just wasn't, didn't engender their brand equity with a lot of the consumer base. Even when they had those, they weren't really financially significant, right? Because the others were, performed so overwhelmingly well.
Yeah. See player talking about Diablo 4. I'd have to look at what Diablo 4 did in terms of sales. I thought it did well, but I have to go back and look. Let's see here. If you're not willing to do that, then you're on another path. You're a publisher across all devices, and you need to embrace that 100%, which is where I think Microsoft is really headed, or where they are. You have to embrace that 100% and be clear. Likely means out of hardware. I fundamentally believe if you don't have great exclusive content, your hardware is doomed, as people won't understand why they need it. This is kind of why I've questioned them bringing first-party games into other platforms. I thought that could potentially devalue the hardware of the Xbox. But then it goes on to say, being the world's largest publisher of games is a great spot to be in. I don't disagree. As long as you can make great games. If you can't, you'll be right back where you started. You have to pick your lane and go hard at it for success with clear communication to your players, which has been an issue, I think, with Microsoft and Xbox. If you play in the middle of these two paths, in my honest opinion, you'll hurt your teams and you'll have constant churn and chaos. I think we're seeing that. It starts and ends with a strong desire to win and make great games that exceed player expectations. That is what is fragile now and needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And they are all hard decisions. It's certainly no easy task given where things stand today, and both paths have dramatic implications. But I fundamentally believe in Xbox, its fans, and the opportunity ahead for great hardware, services, and games, or as a publisher of games and services across any screen. I'm cheering for Xbox, and it pains me to see all the negative swirl. So for those asking, keep the faith in Xbox, but ask for clarity on what the path forward is. I actually like what he says right here. But ask for the clarity on what the path forward is for the brand and product. Then make your own decision on what is best for you and your valuable time and money, as you should as a consumer.
Has Ybarra been watching this show?
I think so. I think so. I think he follows you, Logic.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is, I think a lot of what Ybarra is writing is, and it's a smart thing to do, particularly in the job market that is today. I mean, I definitely think he's bucking to, if not be the heir apparent to the Xbox throne, to be picked up by someone, right? This is the guy who was a starting quarterback somewhere who just went free agency, right? And he's out here on the interview tour, making sure he's making teams aware that he's willing to sign. I think, but as far as Xbox goes, my concern for him would be, as I mentioned, I can't remember when I mentioned it, but maybe it was Wednesday night. Like whoever gets brought, if somebody gets brought into Xbox, whoever gets brought in, you're not coming in to course correct on realizing Spencer's vision. Mm-hmm. You're coming in to be a draconian stoic who realigns the ship to match better with Satye's vision. Or you're coming in to do something that's completely different within a very constrained realm of latitude, and one that requires you to be profitable.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Logic. You actually did say that on Wednesday. I also think one of the, and maybe Ybarra, would it be interesting if they brought Ybarra back? But I think one of the things that they need to fix is what you refer to as their governance over their production pipeline, right? Where, we see these issues with managing their pipeline. Like we hear this, we all know about Halo, but then we hear stories about, Phil not getting the warm and fuzzies from Todd Howard and having to fly out to Bethesda to figure out what's going on with Starfield. Not being happy by what he saw with Starfield, which led to the game being delayed. Then the Redfall debacle. You've had criticisms about Forza. I think with Forza they just really didn't give us much information on that game. I think that game.
And to clarify, like I haven't had. I mean, I've had some criticisms of Forza. I haven't had like hard criticism. My criticism of Forza, I would say, doesn't even go to the extent of my criticism of Starfield. But what I've pointed to Forza is, for the Xbox fandom who refuses to acknowledge tangible data that exists, I've said, who cares what I think, right? Go look at the Steam community user reviews, right? And that tells you how the market has met, right, with that game, where Steam community user reviews are 45% now for recent and 40% for overall. So again, who cares what Game Logic thinks? But what we're not going to do is have you tell me what other people think and what the market at aggregate thinks is irrelevant, because it's not.
Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. Get back to Ybarra here. All right, and then he goes on to say, for those who think I'm one of the people talking to publications anonymously about Xbox, I'm not. I was not a founding member of Xbox, and I think by now, all I won't, I can't even talk now. And I think by now, you all know I won't be anonymous. That we know this about Ybarra. He definitely speaks his mind. If I have something to say. Something that, you talk about founding members. I think of, I know you mentioned Peter Moore, but I was thinking Robbie Bach and, Ed Fries and maybe Jay Allard.
Yeah. Yeah.
He then goes on to say, these are just my opinions. This is the last I will talk about this here on X. It's easy to say what you think when you're not in the trenches living the reality of the challenges. I wish great success for Xbox now into the future. It's good for gaming overall, and I care deeply for Blizzard, who is now part of the Xbox team. So that was quite a long tweet by Mike Ybarra. I forget Ybarra's title when he was at Xbox. I think he was head of Game Pass, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. But so Logic, Any additional thoughts on what Ybarra said here?
I mean, no, like I said, it's I mean, I say it jokingly, but like a lot of that feels like he's read the transcript of a BRAP episode. Because how many times have I said production pipeline, cadence? So I mean, all of those things were littered throughout. What he wrote: consistency, reliability. Delivering on some type of deterministic schedule. And again, it's not going to be, as I mentioned on our podcast earlier today, it's not going to be deterministic. Like, you're not always going to be able to set your watch by it. But that's also why when I ran those calculations about, when is the best time, when is the earliest time that we should reasonably expect the production pipeline to return to green, right, and be clicking along at some type of designated battle rhythm. Part of that set of calculations, and I lined that out on Twitter, was you need redundancy, right? If you want to get to 4 games a year, you can't just be producing 4 games a year. You need to actually produce 6, because you need to assume that 2 of those games are going to miss and not make schedule. So with the resources they had aligned up until this point, that would have definitely been feasible. Where they are now, I'm just not sure. And I'm not sure because I'm saying doom and gloom Xbox. I'm saying I'm not sure because I haven't rerun those calculations. Re-looking at where everybody is in their production pipeline.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, this could be depending on how these games hit, some of the games they have coming out this year this could be one of those things where, yes, early in the year was rough. We could look back at 2024, and the early part of 2024 was rough for Xbox. Hellblade 2 hits, good game. Indiana Jones hit, really good game. Avowed hits, good game. And then who knows what 2025 looks like. I forget, do we even know what the other 10 games are?
No, I don't believe so. No, I mean, somebody wrote up that long list, but again, I mean, you write up that long list and then you knock out 4 studios, and I mean, what does that list mean? Yeah,
and then of course they're going to have Call of Duty. They're releasing that. This could be a good 2024 for them in terms of releases. But I don't disagree with one thing that, again, like we go back to what Ybarra said, like getting those 90+ games, those games that are critically acclaimed, like people have to say, well, oh, you guys say Xbox has no games or Xbox doesn't have games at all. We're like, no. When I've said that, I'm like, Xbox hasn't had games that really move the needle for the platform. That get people that get consumers, that get people wanting to invest in the Xbox ecosystem, to get into Game Pass, to go buy an Xbox Series X or Series S. I just don't think they've had that game yet. Starfield wasn't it. Starfield really didn't move the needle for Game Pass. And I thought Call of Duty would, but now it's like that's kind of up in the air. I know some people are saying that Sarah Baum confirmed that it's actually not the case. Like, that's not, those conversations are still happening. But I don't disagree with them. Like, I always thought this logic that if they could release games that were in the conversation of game of the year that really resonated with a lot of gamers, the way that like Nintendo games do or Sony first party games do, and put those games into Game Pass, I always thought, like, watch out. Because it's a trip. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question that, would be foremost on people's minds would be, and I've talked about this today about, on GCP, part of the problem is like the peanut under the shell keeps moving, right? First it was, and again, I mean, for fans of Xbox, you think I'm just making stuff up, like your very own Paris Lilly, right, alluded to the same. First, the voice track was, hey, we build Game Pass and we acquire these studios so that a company, so that a studio can do something like make a Psychonauts and not have to worry about making payroll, not have to worry about where their next meal is, right? Then it became, right, we need four AAA bangers a year to make the subscription service go. Then last year, that was 2021. Then last year, 2023, it was, hey, we're going to put out 4 games a year to make the subscription go, right? Backing off of the notion of the AAA big budget first party title, right? Now, the beginning of this year, it was, we've got 10 games coming. Now here we are 3 months later, and we're saying, we're going to double down on our tentpole, guaranteed, known good, right, games and IP, and that's what we're going to focus on. So, I mean, this is 2020, 2021, 2023, 2024, and a second drumbeat in 2024, where each time, I mean, I've heard a slightly different voice track on what the release planning looks like and is, and how it's characterized and what it's characterized by. So at some point, you have to knuckle down and be clear to people what the focus of the product is that you're planning on putting out. And that seems to me to constantly shift. So I don't get it. You know, quite honestly, and I'm not saying I'm happy about the studios closing down, but my problem has been, you know, I'm an American, I'm a Westerner. As I mentioned earlier today, before I got married, I always bought American cars. Look, I fell in love with.
By the way, Lodge, I've got a T-shirt for you, but go ahead.
I fell in love with Xbox for Halo, Gears, and Forza, right? For that meat and potatoes, right? I didn't ask for, you know, filet mignon or some specially flavored salmon, right? I want the steak.
You want it medium rare,
and I want to be able to eat it with my boots on.
With,
you know, so
with a side piece.
Yeah. So look, I mean, part of it, part of the voice, the sudden voice track, the inflection point of, hey, we're going to double down on our big AAA tentpole titles, that resonates with me. I'm like, oh, well, maybe we're going to get back to Halo, Forza, and Gears, and I'm okay with that. You know, but the problem I have is, so how long is that voice track going to last? Am I going to hear that change before the year is out? Am I going to hear it change next year? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I've mentioned, you know, when Doom asked me earlier today, hey, what games are you looking forward to? And I mentioned, well, I'm hoping that the fact that I see the Steam pages up for Clockwork Revolution and South of Midnight means that we're going to start hearing something a little more helpful about like when we can expect those games. Might even be this year, right? Tail end of the year, might even be holiday season, might even be, you know, Q1 of next year ish. But my problem is okay, so when that studio is done with Clockwork Revolution, when that studio is done with South of Midnight, are they going to turn around and start cranking on the next game of that ilk? Or are we in an age where that studio is going to be converted to be a Call of Duty support studio or a Halo support studio? You know, if we're going to double down on the big tentpole IPs. That's what I think isn't known and isn't clear now. And I think what we're hearing from the developers, again, I go back to, you know, something I said earlier today, which is the developers are saying, I don't know what constitutes success. Right? These are employees of the company saying this.
Yeah.
And that alludes to just what I said. They don't know if they get done with that game, what's next for them. And that's a problem. BRAP, you're the TA. What impact do we think that has with the employee base? What does that cause them to do?
Not have faith.
And start getting their resumes together.
Yeah, I was just saying leave, yeah.
Like you start fishing expeditions, as we refer to them.
Yeah, like if you don't get clear, concise messaging from leadership, that's the worst thing you can do. And I'll be frank, that kind of behavior isn't behavior of a winning culture. It just isn't. You know, when leadership isn't transparent, when they're constantly changing priorities, it's like, WTF, really again? And then you start talking to your buddies who might be at another company. Oh, you're going to that? Let me tell you about what we do here. You know, and then once those people leave, I mean, like they assuming they've been there for a couple of years, they walk out the door with all that institutional knowledge. That's not, you can't replace that day one by hiring someone new. And I know we've talked about this logic. You bring someone else new and you're paying them more money. You know, there's a domino effect to that, a negative domino effect. You know?
So a question I want to ask is, I think this possible outcome is actually maybe even more realistic than some
Logic,
of the others.
Quick, can I just
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But to your point about the communication and what Ybarra said, and what you said, like you kind of alluded to, are they going to change? like they're not in a good position right now from a PR perspective, and I think with consumer confidence with their base. Because you're right, like they always pivot. It's like here we go again. You know, it's like they bought all these studios and we thought, okay, they're gonna hit their release cadence. This is why they're buying all these studios to feed the beast of Game Pass. That really hasn't happened. You know, and so it's like it's hard to believe now that they're, you know, whatever, you know, and I do think hopefully they lay some clear expectations to their consumer. And even if they do, I think that's still hard to believe. Yeah, like Josh says, they don't stick to their guns. They need to stick to their guns, not just for consumers, but to your point, Logic, for the employees, for the teams, to build their confidence, you know, that they're in a place that they can be successful. Because the inconsistency, messaging by leadership is killer to any culture. At least that's been my experience. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Logic.
One of the things I guess I want to theorize around is, people have talked about various outcomes. You've talked about various outcomes, shifts in kind of the characterization of the business. What if the end result is for them, they're talking about opening up this mobile store. What if the end result is for them to become a Steam competitor?
I mean, they could certainly give Steam a run for their money with their content,
right? And what has Steam done? I mean, what is our main criticism of Valve? Our main criticism of Valve is that they've become hyper focused on just being the world's storefront. Yeah. And they've really kind of lost the mission with regards to making their own games. They do a little investment in seeking out talent, and they go and poach like teams who build on their IP and their engines. And they go, oh, those guys did something neat with Left 4 Dead. Let's go get them. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how the Left 4 Dead team actually got brought in the first place. But our hope of Valve actually making a game, like nobody's holding their breath for that.
Yeah, those days are long gone, I think. You're right. So, no one's holding their breath, yeah.
So Xbox talks about, providing the place where you create, build, deploy, operate, and monetize your content. It sounds an awful lot like a Steam store to me.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely does.
And as you do that larger pivot, you start being less concerned. I mean, who cares about like our own studios or losing our own developers? So again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but
you said that could be. Yeah.
There's definitely, it seems like there's salt and pepper of in the way of that could be the way things go.
Yeah, I want to welcome Falky to the show here. Falky, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Falky. Welcome from down under, Falky. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Man. Doing well.
That's all right. Thanks for letting me in for the short period of time that I can be here.
It's really weird that you couldn't see the Discord. I'm like, what is happening? That was weird, but I'm glad you're here.
It's a bit strange. Good to be here. Hello again, Logic. Good to see you still alive after the last show.
Yeah, you should, Falky.
All right, Falky. So you've been listening to us chat it up here. What are some of the thoughts on the conversation we're having regarding their messaging and yeah?
I think there's a fair bit of credit needs to be given to particularly yourselves, but a few other people, knowing how humble we all are, genuinely. That we talk about this day in, day out on podcasts, off podcasts, in chat, on social media, and all the rest of it. And it seems like what we've been saying for the last 4 or 5 years is coming home to roost. And it's probably taken a little bit longer than we expected. But there's just elements of this that just seems like Daddy's turned the purse strings off and taking control of the ship. And there's just an awful lot of sensibility around what's coming down the pipeline now in terms of resetting to what makes business sense. And as I said in the show earlier today, creators can jump up and down and carry on all they like, and the media can do the same and all that as much as they like. But at the end of the day, it costs money to do this stuff. And if it's not making a return, at some point they'll stop investing money into it and they'll just expect either a return or they'll shut it down.
Yeah, you know what's Falk? It's interesting. You mentioned that some of us have been discussing this for 5 years. I bet you through Optimus Code, the late great Optimus Code, my first I don't say interaction, but the first time I heard you speak was around Game Pass, and you may have been one of the first to break down the finances of Game Pass and the challenges of something like Game Pass and the cannibalization of that those retail sales dollars, and how maybe the math doesn't math, and that's not to we're not. I don't want people to think we're gloating here. We're pointing the finger. Oh, we told you so. But I think that's a fair point, Falky, that a lot of us have been saying things, and Logic was joking that with Mike Ybarra, they sound like he's been listening to BRAP. So, and but no, that's a fair point. But the other thing too, and I want to go back to communication here. I feel like this has got to be it for them. Set a clear message of your strategy, and then just go silent and execute on that strategy. Put your heads down.
I jump in here really quickly on that point, and you and Logic were smashing this out of the park before in the mixed message, especially when Logic was walking through that timeline. Their messaging changed more often than their underpants do, and they just keep switching it up and changing their perspective and whatnot. And I'm the same. Original Xbox 360 days when they expanded a bit more to different titles and got a little bit, creative in that manner, but they did it being able to make money. If they go back to their tentpole, that's the retraction point, and it's not just them. Every business has this. When the markets contract, they go back to their core business, and the core business is always going to be, Halo, Gears, and Forza. Now, if they can figure out a way of making that sustainable and going forward with COD and all the other stuff, then that'll be great. But as it stands, it's not likely. Just hang on a minute.
I believe Falky stepped away here. Yeah, I go back to messaging as we wait for Falky to come back. The message to me was always consistent with the original Xbox, the Xbox 360. I don't know, maybe kind of early Xbox One, but even then I'm not sure. But I go back to the original Xbox, and I remember them talking about the reason why you should have this console, and then executing all those things. We have and I know I sound like a broken record. I've talked about this on this show quite a bit, but hey, we have this internal hard drive. And I don't know if you use this feature, Game Logic, but did you ever rip music to your hard drive and then play the custom soundtracks on the games? Or in the games?
Yeah, I used to. Yeah. I told you I used to race Project Gotham Racing. I think maybe Project Gotham Racing 1 or 2. I can't remember. I think two hit the original Xbox just before we transitioned to 360. I think. Yeah, because PGR 3 was on the 360. So I ripped the Sam Raimi Spider-Man soundtrack.
Oof.
And the nice. Don't hate me, and the Daredevil soundtrack, right, to the Xbox, and that's what I used to drive to in Project Gotham Racing 2.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying. They would say these things and they would execute on them. They would give you, incentivize you to invest. And I feel like I think I'd say the messaging is so, I think, important right now for them, and they got to stop talking to the community. And I heard this on GCP today. I think Everborn brought up what I thought was an interesting point, a good point actually. I thought that he brought up where he said, you never see Strauss Zelnick talking to the community. He talks to Bloomberg. Yeah. Sony doesn't talk to the community; they talk to Bloomberg.
Yeah.
But
you guys can hear me again?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead, Falky. Go ahead, finish your point, Falky. I know you had to step away.
No, you're right. My phone suddenly got yanked out of my hand.
Falky, I hope you're not in trouble, by the way. That's a...
No. Just a young fella being silly.
Okay.
He thought it was it's Mother's Day in Australia, and he thought I was on the phone to Nanny. So,
well, that's why I was like, I hope you're not in trouble, because I know it's Mother's Day. I don't want you get the side eye for the wife, you know.
No, that's all right. I'm out running errands this morning while she's having a lay-in. So, yes. So, no, just walking through that timeline. If they go back to those tent poles, and like any other business, when there's a contraction, you resort back to your core business. You inevitably have a solid grounding, which Xbox does. They've got an ability to tap back into that. We make these top games, and we've got a couple of others in the stable now that we can build around. They do need to unload an awful lot of cost in that process, though, which means that the bleeding of jobs that's happened so far is not even close to being stemmed. But it gives them an opportunity to go back and rebase themselves. And to touch on what we've just been saying about there around the messaging and whatnot, Microsoft, not Xbox management, but Microsoft top-level management is now calling the shots. And they're the ones doing the messaging. They're the ones that are making the decisions. There wouldn't be too many people listening to this podcast that would know this, but if you go and look at how Microsoft communicate their other business units, how the leaders of those units communicate what's happening. If you're in personal computing, Windows OEM and LinkedIn and a few other things, you get very good service from your community, from your customer management team. If you're using intelligent computing and cloud computing and all the rest of that, Microsoft employed a strategy of using resellers to communicate with you as a business. They don't necessarily do direct communication to you. So their ability to communicate what's going on is very, very uniform and very, very standardized. It's painfully vanilla, but it works. What's happened with Xbox is using social media as a platform to communicate with their consumers. They are changing their messaging all the time to try and avoid getting negative feedback. What you'll notice, as you were saying just before, PlayStation doesn't do that. Nintendo doesn't do that. They purposefully stay out of a lot of social media stuff other than the marketing advertisement for that very reason. They don't want to expose themselves to negative feedback. But one thing I will say that I believe Xbox has done irreparable damage to in that respect is they had a very, very solid following, ground game, grassroots level, if you want to call it that, with their influencers and their core fan base. And in this pivot, senior Microsoft leadership has basically put a torch to that and burnt all that goodwill, because they obviously see a better and more effective way of growing that business model without needing that grassroots engagement. I think that they may have misstepped in that respect, because if you've got a 20 million user core fan base and you're able to sustain that, having nothing really to promote and show in terms of games and output, they're obviously very loyal and they're engaged some way through that ambassador and influencer program. So in the same manner that you would win an election, those that have a really strong grassroots campaigns tend to do really well. The problem is that they don't know how to convert that into sales, and that's always going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, that's a great point, Falky. I do want to move on to Sarah Bond, but before I do that, Logic, any additional thoughts before we move on to Sarah Bond's interview with Bloomberg?
No.
All right. I want to move on to Sarah Bond then. And so Sarah Bond was interviewed by Bloomberg's Dina Bass. And I saw some of the reaction by fans on Twitter, and some of the reaction by some journalists. Even Sean Lading kind of chimed in with some emojis, like, the kind of like shoulders up and the face palm. But she was asked directly about the closure of Tango Gameworks, the studios. And I found her response I thought she would at least acknowledge some of the closures. Just be a little bit more direct, just acknowledging that these closures happen. They had to make this difficult decision to downsize. Maybe having a little more empathy, to those employees that were impacted and so forth. I mean, she did focus on the future, which I, more recently, unfortunately, I haven't been RIF, but I've had to be part of a few RIFs over the last year or so. And, there's always a level of empathy and acknowledgement of the impact. And then there's kind of this pivot of, well, this is why we did this, and kind of then focusing on the future of the business based on this rift and things like that, and trying to, as best as possible, maybe highlight some of the positives. But she didn't do that here. And she answered in this response. She said, "One of the things I really love about the games industry is it's a creative art form, and it means that the situation and what success for each game and studio is also really unique. There's no one size fits all. There's no one size fits all to it for us. And so we look at each studio, each game team, and we look at the whole variety of factors when we're faced with making decisions and trade-offs like that. But it all comes back to our long-term commitment to the games we create, the devices we build, the services, and ensuring we're setting ourselves up to be able to deliver on those promises." So, Falky, I'll go to you because I know you're on limited time here. But what when you heard this, what were your initial thoughts about her response to that question?
So I spent that whole interview standing there listening to it, shaking my head, wondering how something as simple as that question could be responded in such a horrific manner for someone at Sarah Bond's level. Just the body language, the face, surely that was a planned question. Executives don't go into these things without knowing what they're going to be asked. And the response was just appalling for someone at that level. And the content of what she was saying, she danced around the question. She gave that lame-ass excuse of an answer. It reeks as if they bought something they didn't know how to manage, or they don't want to apply themselves to manage it properly. Tango Gameworks, Shinji's moved on because he doesn't want to operate under the Microsoft corporate structure. And then apparently a heap of the seniors have left as well. So the team's left with a need to staff up to do their next game. But their last game was, apparently a hit, but it never made them any money. So, we're back to, great. Games are creative art, paying the bill for it. And obviously, if it's not going to make you money, then, again, Dad wants a return on the money he gave you. Either put up or shut up. And I just don't think that they've got the capacity or the capability to operate. To my opinion, I don't think that Microsoft Xbox leadership knows how to operate outside of America. Because every time they get their hands on something that's overseas, it gets too difficult for the regulatory frameworks they have to deal with. They can't do what they want to do, so they shut it down. I feel badly for the people that are affected, but what did they expect was going to happen? But Sarah's response here was just, she didn't want to be there. From you can see from the video, she didn't want to answer his questions. She didn't want to be there. There was no energy. It was disjointed. It lacked any kind of empathy at all. It didn't address the query or the question itself. It rambled on about all this other stuff, trying to hide the complete lack of ability or knowledge on the subject, which she should be knowledgeable about. She's the head of Xbox to a degree, or in charge of parts of Xbox. It just, it was horrible. I'd be surprised if her and Phil and a heap of others are still there after the end of June.
Yeah, I could see her sticking around. I don't know about Phil. I kind of feel like maybe she might be next in line, as she is the president of Xbox right now. Logic, as someone who's managed teams, led teams, imagine you're Sarah Bond. Put yourself in her shoes for just a minute, Logic. You've gone through the closure of these studios. You're sitting in front of I forget her name. Is it Diana? I think it's Diana. Yes, or Dina Bass at Bloomberg. You're asked that question. How would you respond to that question if you were in Sarah's shoes, Logic?
Well, I mean, it's kind of an unfair, like, because I mean, I'm going to voice an answer, right? Having had 48 hours, right, to kind of process this whole thing and put together, so it's. I mean, she was asked that question on the spot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I would allude to, I think the only thing I could point to is what we had done. And you have to meet something like that head on. Like you can't obfuscate, right, or dance around or move horizontally and try and circle the drain like with a bunch of BS that there's public information. Right, and I think what stands out most in my mind is what I mentioned earlier, which is that like we just did a business update in February. Like now we're going to turn around and do this. And the message we gave at the business update in February seems antithetical to what just happened. And so I guess probably the answer to how I would answer that is I would link the two, right? Because I got to get these signals to true up, and I got to get it at least the semblance that there's some consistency and message coming out. And I probably point back to what Phil said, right, in the February update. And I say, look, we said in February at the business update that everything that we always do is for the health of Xbox and for the future of Xbox. And unfortunately, the reality is where we are today and how we've performed on the market. We've had a series of products and services that we've offered that, are not entirely resonating. And in today's environment where, Microsoft as a corporation has more challenges and more things that it's trying to invest in, we've had to look to seek out efficiencies and unfortunately, reduce, labor force that we cannot carry as we pivot into the future. I think that's kind of the way you have to answer it. But you can't, man, Sarah's statement that, there is no one size fits all. There is no answer on what success looks like. Like that's a problematic answer. And maybe she was being truthful. Maybe that was a prepared answer. Maybe it wasn't. But like again, that's the thing. I'm like, so if I'm an Xbox employee, I say, so what you're saying, Sarah, is regardless of the outcome of the title that I work on, you guys don't know what the F that means for me. Mm-hmm. You just take my game and my output that I produce, you throw it in a big freaking lotto machine, you rotate the handle around, and if my studio or my name is the one that gets picked out of the hat, right, then I could be the next one gone, regardless of whether or not I made a successful game, regardless of whether or not I built this game that is what you guys said you wanted, which is a game that builds communities, right? It gets people to be social and allows people to play across platform. Like, I mean, because she didn't just say, to me, she didn't just say that, it's not one size fits all, and that she didn't say it varies. To me, I mean, that may have been what she said, but that's just not what I heard. What I heard is that we cannot articulate or define what success looks like for a title. And unfortunately, what it sounds like to me, and what I think I hear happening is that whether or not a title is successful is determined after the fact. Again, that's a problem. If you don't have the ability to define a KPI on the front end, mm-hmm. then you don't have the ability to articulate to people what target they're shooting for. What you're saying is that, I mean, this is what we saw with Hi-Fi Rush. What you're saying is the game came out, and Jesus Christ, like you have Aaron Greenberg running around saying, "Oh, this game performed and met all of our metrics and internal goals." I mean, so you're saying a title came out, hit all of your metrics and your internal goals, but then yet after the fact, you decided that this ain't it, and that the studio needs to go away. So something changed. Either your metrics or your internal goals changed, your strategy changed, or you were lying in the first place. One of those three things must be an absolute truth.
Yeah.
Let's not let's not breeze past. Sorry, just to make this quick comment, then I got to go. Let's not breeze past the fact that Xbox for the last 5 years plus has been trying to run their own set of success metrics and keep constantly telling the greater public and the greater consumer, game sales don't matter, console sales don't matter, all these other standard items that everyone else guides themselves by, be it platform owners or major third-party publishers. All these things don't matter. We don't track that stuff. We just look at things like user engagement, and we look at things like, the standard playtime on Game Pass, and all these other made-up internal factors that they look at that are only useful for Xbox internally, that mean nothing to anyone else outside of the organization. They've been hammering us with that for forever. And then lo and behold, when it comes to nut cutting time, what's the go here? Oh shit, actually sales do matter. We're going to put games on PlayStation because their consumers buy games. We're going to have a problem because their games aren't up to that quality. Well, we were designing and building games to go into Game Pass where the quality and all that didn't matter. We just needed something to capture engagement. They had an entire business model built around internal metrics that meant nothing outside of the organization. They haven't had a Game of the Year thing go up forever, except for Hi-Fi Rush getting a couple of nominations at the Game Awards. And then all of a sudden, that studio's no good, we're going to shut it down. Not, we're going to support it to try and improve on it, like what PlayStation did with Housemarque. As a third party, got an amazing game out there in Resogun. They had an idea, PlayStation supported them, delivered this massive, beautiful idea, and in Returnal, and now they're doubling down on that and in trying to improve the studio. Xbox's response to this is, hey, it met all our internal expectations, except those internal expectations are so much based in fantasy that they don't translate to the broader industry. And we're not even interested. We don't have the funds now to support this studio, so we're just going to shut them down. And I think they were the only major Japanese exposure point that Xbox had. So what does that say to their broader strategy that they said 12 months ago of, we're keen to be in Japan. We're going to make an effort in Japan. We're doing all this in Japan. It just reeks of management having no clue that they've fed themselves so much bullshit that they're actually starting to believe their own lies. And there's so much in their own echo chamber that they can't see what's actually happening. And it's sad because they should have kept their finger on the pulse. Plenty of other places have done that, and they've managed to navigate through troubled times. There's a heap of third-party publishers are on their 5th, 6th, and 7th year of, record revenues and record profits and, increases and improvements. And then if you listen to anyone who talks about the industry that's Team Green, they'll tell you that the whole thing's going to fall into a heap tomorrow. So, I really have little sympathy for these people because, and particularly Sarah Bond. Sarah's a Harvard-educated graduate. She got a master's degree in business from Harvard. She should know better. And I think it's completely fair to hold her to a higher standard. Anyway, having had that little ramble, I do need to head off, guys. But thank you very much for having me for a short visit. Enjoying the show. Keep at it, and I'll catch up with you soon.
All right, Falky, thank you so much. I appreciate your time as always. And I think, Falky, are you coming back on Wednesday? Is that?
That's the plan.
Okay, so we should see you again on Wednesday then. Falky, thank you so much. Appreciate your time as always.
All right, see you guys. Bye.
Yep, see ya. Logic, anything else to add? I think to your point that there's no one size fits all for us. That maybe not having internal KPIs, a level of standard, a bar, if you will, that could be concerning if that's true.
Well, the last thing I'll say is to win together what we're seeing and what's happening. And I put some of these pieces together earlier today. I mentioned that Phil Spencer's Twitter account hasn't tweeted anything out since the 6th of May. So Sarah Bond was the one on the stage for the Bloomberg interview. I mentioned that Amy Hood is firmly, at least partially in control, at least as far as saying, this is the goal you guys need to hit, go hit it. Like, I don't care how you get there. That's up for you guys to decide. because I asked you to figure it out before and you didn't.
You did, yeah.
So as I've told employees, some of my own employees this week, when we have problems like this, either you guys get in a room and figure it out, or I'll give you the solution, and the solution that I give you, I assure you, will not be one that makes people happy. Because at that point, I'm not going to care.
That is never that is not the conversation you want to have. By the way, trust me. Right. I've been in those rooms. Like, if you don't figure it, look, when leadership comes to you, says figure it out, and if you don't, I'm going to figure it out. Like, they're panic mode, 4-alarm fire. It's time to sit down and figure this shit out, or else.
Right. So, I mean, there's one skinny possibility that's going on here. Again, I drew this linkage to previously seen causality. Remember when Redfall hit? And remember, we didn't hear a squat from the Pete Hines' account until it was time for him to tweet out a couple things in support of Starfield. But when Redfall hit, from that point on until he left, until we got the announcement that he was leaving, there was very little from Pete Hines' Twitter account. And up until that point on his timeline, that was not the case. So what could potentially be going on is that Satya and Amy have said this is what's going to do. Satya said, look, I want money for AI. And I'm going to Amy Hood, and she's telling me, well, you need to make some choices. Because I just spent $70 billion on your gaming division. Now you're coming to me telling me you want AI stuff. Oh, by the way, the Azure dude has knocked on my door 3 times today already and said he's tired of taking the shot in the arm for Xbox, being allocated their costs.
He's holding up his spreadsheet logic.
That's right. that he's carrying on their books.
Yeah.
And so what may be going on now is, you know, we may be seeing Sarah Bond getting handed the reins.
Let me chime in. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Logic. Yeah, I was going to say real quick, there are some rumors circulating. Again, nothing official, that Phil is no longer in charge. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm trying to bypass those rumors and reference things that I've said before.
I know, but I what you're saying, Logic. Look, man. I tell you this all the time, man. You say stuff, and damn it happens. Go ahead. I'm just saying possibly. So what I feel so one thing that we may have been seeing, a lot of people have been reading into the expression Sarah Bond had on the stage, and I will admit, when this was happening, when this was happening and it was Xbox people saying it, I will readily admit, I was like, so all you guys are now FBI forensic, profilers saying that you can tell when somebody's lying just from their facial expressions on stage. I think maybe what we saw was, hey, these are decisions I didn't make. Right? Satya and Amy pushed them, and maybe because this is what we saw with Forrestal, right? Because I constantly make frequent references back to the incident we saw with Forrestal and Tim Cook. So Apple Maps comes out. It's a complete dumpster fire. Tim Cook goes to Forrestal and says, you need to make a public apology for this. This happened on your watch. It's your product. You're the president of that division, the VP. You need to go out and tell people you dorked this up and what you're going to do to fix it. And Forrestal said no. So Tim said, okay, roger that. You're out. Goodbye. Pack your bags. Go see HR about your severance package. I'm not saying it's that extreme, but I wonder if we're saying that Amy and Satya pushed the buttons on this and told Phil, hey, you got to make some cuts. We don't care how you do it. And this is the end result, right? And we've had lots of conversation about how what they just did this week is completely counter to what they've been saying for the last several years. I wonder if the direction was, hey, Phil, you need to go sit on a stage and talk to Bloomberg, and you're probably going to ask these questions. And Phil said, yeah, I didn't make this call. You guys did. I'm not going to go do that. And so it's not unusual when things like that happen for them to go to the next person in line and say, hey, Phil's digging his heels in and is refusing to go do this. You need to go do it. And Sarah may have said, okay, I'll go do that, but she didn't do it happily, right? The expression on her face on stage may very well have been, I didn't make this call. Satya and Amy did. Phil refused to come out here and say it. I need a job. I'm not done.
right? I need to still keep trying to climb the ladder and get to where I need to go. So I'm going to come here and take the shots, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I mean maybe. By the way, just want to reiterate, we're not saying this is what happened. Speculating here that this could have happened behind the scenes. So, yeah, it's funny you mentioned the body language stuff. I saw some of that too. I'm like, I don't know about if she was caught off guard by the question. She knew the question was coming or that was going to be asked. I mean, how can you not, right?
I honestly don't. I haven't agreed with that. I actually.
You don't think she like that?
I don't. My personal belief, again, totally in the realm of speculation, right? Not even in the realm of analysis, right? Not in the realm of like the normal thing I try to do with data crunching of numbers. I feel like the way, like when she got asked that question, I just, the expression on her face was just like, this bitch here.
Yeah, everyone screen captured her face. I mean, to your point, she was kind of like, really? Did you just ask? But I mean, but you have
look at this bullshit. Like, look, if you look at a frame, I guarantee you the facial expression on her face. Remember that that Viola Davis meme?
Oh yeah,
from How to Get Away with Murder, where she looks sarcastically at the person, reaches out and gets her purse and goes to leave.
Yep.
Her expression looked exactly like that.
Oh my gosh. That is funny. But I can't imagine she didn't know that question would come up in light of everything that just happened. I mean, like she had to be prepped. Like, hey, they're probably going to ask you this, and this is what you need to say. At least that's what I think probably happened. Again, I'm not saying it was completely out of the realm of possibility, but I mean, when she asked it, she was just like, look at this bullshit here. Like she was getting ready to get up and leave. Like, nah, we're not doing this.
Hell no, she didn't just ask me that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's funny. Oh man. I tell you what, there's a lot of, I talked about the PR nightmare. I think this is, in my opinion, for Xbox. I'm seeing it on social media now. Somebody had tweeted, I don't think Xbox will ever be seen the same way by developers. Who knows if any of this is true? Somebody responded, I've seen devs discussions in private discords. The long-term sentiment.
That guy is a developer.
I'm
pretty sure. I'll go back and look at the tweet, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's a guy in the biz and in the industry and is in these private discords with other devs.
Actually, you're absolutely right. You're right. All I saw was BAFTA with him, but no, a principal game dev and BAFTA committee member, previous at Naughty Dog, Rocksteady Games, Respawn. So he's saying, I've seen dev discussions in private discords. Long-term sentiment is not looking great. Wow. This kind of goes back to what you and I talked about earlier in the show. When you asked me the question, from a TA perspective, what happens when you don't give a clear, concise message to your teams? You don't set these clear objectives. People leave. People start seeing studio closures. We heard just quarter report, developers didn't know what success was. They felt like, or what defined success in Game Pass. They felt like they were flying blind. That's a problem. So that's a big problem. And now we're seeing what this gentleman's saying in the discords. I don't know. And then that makes it hard to attract good talent. But anyhow.
Well, it makes it hard for people to have high productivity and high velocity, right? Like I talked about on Wednesday. I mean, these things are kind of what we refer to as distraction rounds, right? They're the things that get in people's windshields and like, look, when a person's supposed to be at their desk writing code, right? It's the distraction, right? And the distraction could come from that phone call, that buzz, right? Telling you that someplace that you put your job application in is calling. And you're like, oh, you take a break. You step outside and take that phone call. So, I mean, that's part of the thing that here we are on the precipice of just having put out what I feel like was a pretty decent roadmap, right? In terms of last year, not really a roadmap because a roadmap to me by definition is inclusive of dates or at least projections, but at least a service catalog, right, of content that consumers should be expecting out of the portfolio that is Xbox Game Studios. And to me, these things, some of these projects are now going to be difficult to get across the line because of this distraction. And the emails that we've seen, the things that were even going around, even when you look at the business update, and Falke pointed out, he found fault with like Sarah Bond and he wasn't, letting her get a pass on that. I will say one of the things I've been critical about Sarah Bond is like this whole thing of, oh, we're going to produce this console that makes the biggest technological leap ever. And then like the email that came out from her, that Jess Corden put out. But then also my thing of like the town hall meeting of like her coming in and saying this screen is an Xbox. This, like, it just sounds, and yes, she's a Harvard Business graduate, which I've also, applauded her for as far as like her background and her CV. But like so many of the things that she said recently over the last 3 months just sound like the most cringe Mahogany Row C-suite executive type of tropish comments. And I'm like, you're really sounding disconnected from the front line when you say these things. So the question becomes like my point being, no, what the troops need to be told now, and I actually said this like several years ago, right, when we had some of these things now where I've mentioned where the KPIs are shifting around and teams have faced adversity and challenge and like the businesses face challenge. I'm like, you need to be the type of leader that's out telling the troops, look, you're hearing bad news. You're hearing, maybe this isn't it. This isn't the thing, but maybe it's not. But our direction is to continue charging forward until we make a decision to do otherwise. And like, that's not the message that I've ever heard coming out of the camp. You even go back to the Xbox One, and one of the things that I'll mention, Greg Miller has always said about that time of the Xbox One launch is, what are the things that made him not feel great about the Xbox approach at the Xbox One launch, and even as Phil Spencer came to power, is, they didn't stick to their guns. You want to push like online always connectivity. You want to push being the centerpiece entertainment appliance of every American's living room. Then you push that, right? You don't face adversity and then shake off of it, because that lends, and that's what we've seen over the last few years. It's just this constant shifting, constant pivoting. Like the joke to a certain extent is, oh yeah, here's the pivot. But I'm like, it's okay. Well, it's really here's another pivot or the next pivot. Like we've been pivoting, every few months since 2014.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that doesn't instill confidence in your staff when you start doing that. When you're constantly changing your internal strategy, I want to go back to this tweet logic. I didn't realize the gentleman who tweeted, I do not think Xbox will ever be seen the same by developers. He actually is a founder, studio creative director at Outsider Games. He's worked on Battlefield 3, Bad Company, Payday 2, Killzone 2, Mirror's Edge, so a couple other games. So there you go. There you have it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run. They do have their show next month. And, hopefully they show a lot of content and maybe give a more definitive roadmap or strategy and what they plan moving forward. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So any other closing thoughts, Logic, before we wrap up the rant?
No, not really.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone in the live chat for stopping by with us this evening for this very impromptu BRAP rant. Please do me a favor, hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Helps people find the channel. If you're new, subscribe and hit the bell notification so you are alerted when we go live. Also want to thank our good friend from down under, David Faulkner, Falke, for joining us for a bit. It is Sunday there in Australia, so thank you again. I believe Falke will be back this Wednesday with us as well. I think Detective Seeds might be joining us on Wednesday. Also want to thank you as well, Logic, for jumping on. Answering the call. I did put in the BRAP DM, hey, I'm going live if anyone wants to join in. So as always, certainly appreciate your time and perspective as well. So thank you. I don't know if you want to be found, Logic. I don't think you did Wednesday, but if you do, let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can catch me on the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. and right here at at 8:45 p.m. ish Sunday nights Eastern time on the E2KG Network podcast channel, and here Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast.
By the way, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
By the way, Logic, AAA BRAP is in fact playing a non-AAA game. I was playing Yuden Chronicles for a few hours yesterday.
That's good, man. You and me both. I've been playing the Drive Rally demo, which is by indie developer
nice.
Pixel Perfect Dude.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Actually,
if PC,
if you do, okay. I've been playing it on PC. Yeah, if you do want to find me, you can find me at Game Logic on Twitter, where I posted my early review thoughts. Not early review thoughts, but first early impressions of the Drive Rally demo on Twitter.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, definitely look out for that if you're interested. And one more thing, Logic, great find. You tweeted this morning. What was it? Was it PC? Oh, shoot. It was a YouTube clip. It wasn't PC Mag.
Oh, I think I tweeted that last night, actually. Yeah. Yeah. So same thing. If you go to my Twitter account, you can see where I posted a clip from the Full Nerd podcast. So I've talked extensively about kind of my feelings about current day mainstream gaming journalism. I came up in the 90s, 2000s, in the heyday of gaming journalism, and one of my kind of seminal leaders in that realm were Gary Whitta, who was editor-in-chief of PC Gamer in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I'm also a big fan
of Gary Whitta, by the way.
Yeah. And then also Gordon Mong, who was eventually editor-in-chief of Maximum PC. I posted a clip. So Gordon now works at PC World. He is on a podcast called The Full Nerd. And a person who's been guesting on the show recently is Will Smith, who succeeded him at some point as editor-in-chief of Maximum PC, but was also the editor-in-chief of Tested, which I think some of you might know because it was a more popular kind of outlet, and also was an employee at, I think, I have it right here, at Stray Bombay, who were the developers of the game The Anacrusis, which is a 4-player co-op game that is on Steam and is also on Game Pass on the Xbox. So I posted a clip from episode 300 of The Full Nerd, and Will there, again, who is coming at things from having worked at a development studio, talked about releasability and how Helldivers 2 wound up being in all the countries where it is. And then also talked about things, regulatory compliance that drove Sony to require connection to the PSN account. And then I mentioned on Doomsayer's podcast, like this whole notion of the 177 countries where the game can't be published. And I'm not sure why people aren't doing this, but you can go through that list and see the type of countries they are. And you should arrive at the conclusion that maybe somebody in Antarctica or Madagascar or on the Seychelles Islands maybe isn't that big of a financial impact if they can't play Helldivers 2. It's not to say that those people don't matter, but I'm saying there's been a lot of assertions this past week that the decisions that were made were for money. And again, I don't think the footprints for those 177 countries, 177 seems large, right? But before you go touting that 177 numbers is large, second of all, these aren't all sovereign nations that are recognized as such by the United Nations. They're primarily economic zones or economic, regions. Yeah. So, you should do things like look at how many countries are there in the United Nations, what constitutes being recognized as a standalone national entity by the United Nations, what is the difference between a sovereign nation and an economic region, and then look at the list of countries where the game can't be sold. Think about what bandwidth is available there, how different their economic regimes might be from the G8, the G9, the G12. I can't remember how many they're up to now, but most of the economies of the world, and then think about is it really a huge economic impact for Sony to not allow the game to be sold there? Maybe not. Probably not, given that they're definitely going ahead with that route with Ghost of Tsushima. So again, as much as we attribute decisions and financial causality. In most cases, people don't sit around a table, talk about a lot of contingencies and choices that can be made, and then deliberately, consciously choose the choice that will make them less money. Most companies don't operate that way.
You don't say. Companies like making money. Yeah. Well, I saw some people up in arms about the delisting for Ghost of Tsushima. And people are saying that's a bad look, and I'm just shaking my head for some of the reasons you just mentioned. But no, that's a great point. But that video was super insightful in terms of why Sony would have or require a PSN account. So that was very insightful. Great video. So, all right, I got one more. I do have one more super chat. Silverback with the Canadian $2 super chat says, "Good talk." Thank you so much for that super chat. I appreciate it. And if you want to give me a follow on the Twitters or X, it's BRAP_podcast. We'll be back next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time with Falky will be joining us. I think Detective C's might be joining us. I need to confirm with him. He's supposed to join us this past week and couldn't make it, unfortunately. But I do believe he'll be joining us again. So, and then come join the panel of Logic, Slow-Mo, B-Money, and Gaming Forte. So, all right, everyone, have a great rest of the weekend. Enjoy playing video games. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, and we'll catch you next time.